A military coup in Guinea. Soldiers appear on national television to say they've ousted President Alpha Condé. Unconfirmed reports say the president has been arrested by security forces following hours of heavy gunfire in the capital, Conakry. A female Afghan police officer has been shot dead in her home by unidentified men days after the Taliban took full control. It took place in the city of Firozpur, the capital of Central Ghor province. The head of one of Prince Charles's charities has stepped down after claims he helped secure a government honour for a wealthy Saudi donor. Michael Fawcett is a former aide to Prince Charles. The Prince's Foundation says it is investigating. The Tokyo Paralympics have come to an end with a spectacular closing ceremony after 12 days of competition. China topped the medals table.
Upcoming anniversary of 9/11. Next Saturday will be 20 years since the coordinated attacks that took almost 3,000 lives and dramatically changed this country forever. This morning, the Department of Homeland Security is warning that terrorists could exploit the anniversary. That's as the president is now promising to reveal more about the original investigation. ABC's Mary Alice Parks has the latest from the White House.
President Biden directed the Department of Justice to begin declassifying some documents from the government's years-old investigation into the September 11th terrorist attack. The new executive order gives the Attorney General 6 months to make documents public, with one review ordered to be completed by the 20th anniversary of the attacks next week. It states information should not remain classified when the public interest in disclosure outweighs any damage to the national security. The significant events in question occurred 2 decades ago. Like his predecessors, President Biden was facing pressure from victims' families. Hundreds had, in a recent letter, told the president he would not be welcome at memorial events unless he declassified material, specifically anything relating to whether Saudi Arabia's government played a possible role in the attacks.
A huge chunk of the hijackers were Saudi. The bigger question with the Saudis is, what did they actually know about some of these players, about some of their own citizens, and what was in their intelligence files prior to 9/11. So some of that might come out in documents released, and my guess is clearly some of it will not.
Late last week, the Department of Homeland Security and FBI warning that foreign terrorist organizations could exploit the anniversary. The agencies saying in a bulletin sent to law enforcement leaders obtained by ABC News that they are not currently aware of any specific credible threats related to the date. To mark the anniversary next weekend, the president plans to travel to all 3 memorial sites in New York City, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and at the Pentagon. Whit.
It'll be a somber week ahead. All right, Mary Alice Parks for us. Thank you. And the years-long fight for 9/11 records is the subject of ABC's new documentary series, 9/11 plus 20, The Longest Shadow, hosted by our own George Stephanopoulos. It premieres tomorrow evening.
The Tokyo Paralympics have now come to a close with a spectacular ceremony featuring music, dance, and performance. Around 4,400 athletes from 162 countries and territories participated in the Games, the most ever. The athletes marched in carrying their flags, starting with the refugee team. Athletes from Afghanistan were present, even though they had given up on participating at one point. During the opening ceremony, the flag was carried in by a volunteer. With harmony in mind, dancers conjured a vision of society celebrating diversity. Tokyo's governor passed the Paralympic flag to the IPC president, who then handed it over to the mayor of Paris. The French capital hosts the Games in 2024. The ceremony was aired live in the City of Light, where crowds gathered near the Eiffel Tower. Some of the medal winners from Tokyo were there. As the ceremony came to a close, the Paralympic flame was extinguished. At Tokyo Tower in the city center, the word arigato, meaning thank you, was written out in giant letters and bright lights. The Games were held during Japan's worst ever infection spike, and organizers insist they were delivered safely. Earlier, we spoke with NHK World's Maruyama Yuki about the legacy and outcome of Tokyo's Paralympics.
First, let's look at the total number of infections. Organizers said there were more than 300 cases linked to the Paralympics. including 13 athletes. They said there were no serious cases or large clusters. Coronavirus measures were crucial for the Games because many athletes have underlying health conditions. Officials said they took the right measures to prevent major problems.
Okay, now what other impacts did the pandemic have on the Games?
Well, it affected preparations a lot. Athletes couldn't take part in international competitions this year because of the pandemic. So for some sports, organizers had to make last-minute decisions about who would compete in events. And it meant one Japanese athlete who was a medal contender wasn't eligible for an event he won before.
And there was a lot of public opposition to these Games. Were the Paralympics able to overcome that?
People in Japan were divided about whether these games should continue or be cancelled. But Japanese athletes had success at the Olympics, so support began to grow for these games. And once they started, millions in Japan watched on TV. The athletes' stories were inspiring. Some had lost limbs in conflicts or had been born with disabilities in poorer countries. They crushed stigma and stereotypes with their powerful performances and showed the world they can do anything. So overall, I think the organizers should have been more transparent about everything in Tokyo and talked to opponents who were anxious.
Now, Tokyo became the first city to host a Summer Paralympics twice. What legacy do you think these Games will leave for Japan?
Well, even though they were held with few spectators, organizers think it raised more awareness about people living with disabilities. These games were a lot different than the 2012 Paralympics in London, where venues were packed with fans. They are considered to be one of the most successful games because they helped change attitudes about disability. There are small signs of progress in Tokyo. For example, we now have more accessible train stations, but many people believe the Paralympics will mean much more than that and leave a lasting social legacy.
Health Ministry officials say more than 2,200 coronavirus patients in Japan are seriously ill. The number of COVID patients who need to be connected to ECMO lung heart machines reached a record high of 161 on Saturday. This vehicle is designed to transport a COVID patient hooked up to an ECMO machine. The mobile intensive care unit is equipped with ventilators and oxygen cylinders. Tokyo only has one of these special vehicles, so it's in high demand. On Thursday, the ECMO car was sent to a medical institution in the capital. This patient has been on a ventilator but needs an ECMO machine due to worsened respiratory functions. The vehicle transferred the patient to another hospital. It took about 3 hours for the medical staff to connect the patient to the device. The hospital transfer was completed about 6 hours after the car was dispatched.
If the number of seriously ill patients keeps increasing, it will be impossible to take further measures. We are close to the limit.
Authorities in Japan reported 12,908 new cases on Sunday. The health ministry says 2,207 people around Japan are seriously ill with the coronavirus. That's 16 fewer than Saturday's tally, the highest number since the pandemic began. A number of major train stations and roads in Japan were made barrier-free before the Paralympics. The taxi industry has also introduced wheelchair-friendly taxis that passengers can use comfortably. Japan's Transport Ministry plans to increase the number of such vehicles. It expects they will make up about a quarter of the taxis in each prefecture in about 5 years. But there are still some problems to resolve, including reports of people being denied service. Some of the cases involve drivers of this taxi company who lack the relevant knowledge. The firm is training the drivers with the help of officials from welfare organizations.
Our company seeks to achieve universal services, so all our passengers can get around easily.
The company plans to provide similar training sessions for its drivers at least twice a year. Strained bilateral relations between Japan and South Korea in recent years didn't stop an annual cultural exchange festival over the weekend. Sunday's event was held online amid the coronavirus pandemic. Its theme, Let's Walk Together Even Though We Can't Meet Face to Face. The festival in Seoul was streamed live online, mixed with pre-recorded videos, including messages from Japanese and South Korean pop stars. A committee of Japanese and South Korean companies and organizations has organized the event since 2005. One popular activity among the university student volunteers was trying on Japanese summer kimono.
I want this event to help people more deeply understand each other's cultures.
It's important for youth of both nations to interact with each other despite political relations.
The festival will also be held in Tokyo, where it will be live streamed next Saturday. Those were the stories for this hour.